Hey guys, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are starting off in the kitchen. We are making my mom's old-fashioned oatmeal cookies, and they are delicious. Then we're going to go to the sewing room and we are going to get sewing and see if we can get that top done for my Home is Where the Heart Is quilt. I'm really excited. It's just about done and I want to bring you along. So stick around if you're interested in cooking or sewing. Well, I hope everyone is doing well. We are doing great here on Blue Rooster Farm. And the weather today is a bit chilly, but yesterday it was in the 60s. We've had a really nice warm stretch and it was beginning to feel like spring. But now we're getting back into the regular seasonable weather, and that's fine because we don't want everything to start leafing out and coming up and then have a bad frost. It's still early. So today I thought would be a perfect day to make some old-fashioned oatmeal cookies. And I was going through some of my grandmother's recipes, and she used to write down recipes in these little spiral notebooks. And this would have been in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and probably even in the early 80s. But she would keep these, and if she heard a recipe on the radio or saw something on a cooking show, or if she got a recipe from a friend at church or a family member, she would just write them in this little notebook. And she's got several of these. Some of them are quite old, and you can tell the pages are browning, and she has wonderful handwriting though. But she would write down the ingredients. Now, I found a recipe in there that had my mom's name on it, and that meant my mom shared it with her. And so I was thinking this is probably the recipe my mom used to make all the time, the oatmeal cookies that we grew up on. And so this morning I talked with my mom and I asked her, is this the recipe that you always would make? And she said, yes, it is. And she got it off of a Quaker Oats can. And so I went on the internet to look and see if I could find this recipe to know exactly what oatmeal cookie it was. And I had a really hard time finding it. I think I found something very close, and it was the oatmeal crispies, and it's very close, but hers is just a tiny bit different. The flour is a little bit different. I think they had 1.5 cups and she had 2 cups of flour. So it's not quite that recipe, but she does say that this was a recipe off of a Quaker Oats canister. And this, I would say, would be in the late 60s or 70s, early 70s, because she made these cookies a lot. I remember coming home from school and they would be in the oven and they would always be delicious. Now, she would a lot of times put raisins in them, and I know my sister did not like baked raisins, so she had to pick her raisins out of her cookies. But of course, I thought they were great with the raisins too. Now, my husband's not a big cooked raisin fan either, so I'm not going to use regular raisins today. Now, my mom would also sometimes put chocolate chips and nuts, and that was also delicious. So I thought that I would take her recipe, divide the dough into 2 parts, and one part I'm going to make a walnut cranberry white chip cookie, and in the other one I'm going to do chocolate and pecans. I thought that would be really good too. So I'm going to share this recipe with you, and I hope you like it as much as I remember liking it. I can't wait to taste it to see if it's the same taste that I grew up with. Now, I will tell you, she does use 1 cup of shortening, and I am going to replace that today with a cup of softened butter. And I did that because that's what I had out already softened. So we're gonna do butter And I did see this exact recipe. It didn't say anything with Quaker on a couple of different sites. And like I said, it was really close to the exact recipe. But they used butter, or they used half a cup of butter, half a cup of shortening. So I'm going to use 2 sticks, which is 1 cup of butter, but you can use half and half, all butter or all shortening. The texture will vary just a little bit. I think with shortening, the cookies tend not to spread as much. With butter, they will spread a little more. And it also depends on your butter and how much water content is in your butter and how much fat content is in there. Because if you've ever baked with like the Amish roll butter versus the store-bought butter, you know that the Amish roll butter has a different texture than the store-bought butter, because the Amish roll butter is actually a lot higher in fat, and so it does cook a little differently. So I'm just using, I don't even know what brand butter I'm using, probably, oh, there it is. It is Best Choice, Walmart's Best Choice butter. So we'll see how it turns out. So I went ahead, and because you know how messy I am when I cook, I do not want this to be anywhere near me because it is in my grandma's handwriting and it means a lot to me. So I'm going to take this and set this aside so it's not going to get anything on it. I did copy it, and I even made it bigger, and you can see her beautiful handwriting. And she would just write the ingredients, and she knew how to make the cookies so that it's basically the same way you make any cookie. You do the cream, the butters and the sugars, add the eggs, and then the dry ingredients. And so she just wrote the ingredients down here, and so that's what we're going to do. And so let's get this made. I can't wait to try it. Let me put this away. Okay, now I'm starting off with a dirty bowl. I was out of brown sugar, so I had to mix up a new batch of brown sugar. And if you don't know how to make your own brown sugar, I do have a recipe or a video showing you how to do that, and I'll link it in the description box below. But now my brown sugar container is all filled up and I'm ready to go. I'm not washing this pan. We're gonna get it dirty anyway, and it's gonna be full of brown sugar, so it's fine. So I'm gonna take my 2 sticks of softened butter. Again, 1 cup of shortening, 1/2 cup of butter, 1/2 cup of shortening, whichever combination you want to do. But you want it to be softened, not melted, softened. And you will find that when you melt and when you soften butter, your cookie dough will be different. Okay, so we've got that in there. Now let's just crank that up and spin it around a little bit. That looks good. Then we're going to add 1 cup of white sugar, 1 cup of brown sugar. And this is where I found that a lot of the Quaker oat recipes for all their different variations of oatmeal cookies from different eras, they would vary the amount of sugar and brown sugar. And this one is 1 cup of each. So I've already got it measured out. We'll just pour it in there, and mix it. Now, I let that mix for about a minute. Whenever you're creaming your butter and your sugar together, you should get a nice creamed in mixture. It should all come together and be a nice creamed in mixture. Now, depending on the temperature of your butter will depend on its consistency, but it should be all creamed together. All right. Now we're gonna add our 2 eggs. And I am also going to add my vanilla. Now I stopped and I scraped down the sides, and then I mixed some more. So I mixed for about a minute or a little longer. And I've got a nice creamy mixture like that, okay? So now what we need to do is we need to add our dry ingredients. Oh, and I did not add my vanilla. Let me add my vanilla. Can't leave that out. And it does say a teaspoon of vanilla.
Okay, now we've got it. We've got our vanilla, our eggs, our sugar, brown sugar, and our fat, which I'm using butter. Now we need our dry ingredients. So let's take 2 cups of flour. We're going to start off with 2 cups of flour, and this is where this recipe is different than a lot of them that I saw. A lot of them had 1.5 cups of flour, and then they had a really flat cookie. I don't want the really flat one if I can help it. Hers weren't real flat. They were a nice consistency, nice thickness. Then we're going to take, it says 1/2 teaspoon of soda and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And so we're gonna add that. And I'm actually going to use a teaspoon of baking powder just because, this is the baking soda here, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. But I'm going to use a teaspoon of baking powder because I'm not sure on this recipe. A lot of times my mom might have just been telling her the recipe from how she made it and was just saying, I think it was this and this. So I'm going to just go ahead and do 1 teaspoon of baking powder because I know that will work out fine. 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and then we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now, if you don't like your cookies very salty, I did use salted butter, but I do like to have that salt in my cookies too. I think it brings out the flavor. So I'm going to do 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now we have those dry ingredients in there, and we're going to turn this on slowly so we don't have a big mess, and we're going to mix this. And I don't want to overmix it, but I do want to make sure everything is incorporated in there. We don't want our flour to get tough. Now, I do have my oven set for 350 degrees. Now I'm going to add 3 cups of rolled oats. Now, if you only have instant, you can go ahead and add instant, but your texture is going to be different than mine. It will be a finer texture, and it may even, the dough may even thicken up a little bit more. I'm not sure. We always usually used rolled oats, but I know she probably used sometimes the instant too. It's whatever we would have had on hand. But I'm gonna go ahead and use the rolled oats, and if you use instant, just know that yours might look a little different. They'll still taste really good. Okay, because that is so thick, I let it mix for about a minute just to make sure all of those oats are incorporated into that batter, and I think I got it. I also brought over a bowl because now we're going to divide it into 2. Now in this recipe, also we have cinnamon, and it's just cinnamon to taste. I would say a teaspoon of cinnamon would probably be fine. I am going to add cinnamon to my craisin and walnut and white chip one. I'm not going to add cinnamon to my chocolate chip one, even though you certainly can, and my mom did, and they were perfectly good. But since I'm making 2 varieties, I think I want them to be a little different, and that way we will have 2 completely different looking cookies. So now my job is to divide this dough into 2 about equal bowls full. And I'm just going to keep this bowl because I don't want to get 2 more bowls dirty, so I'll just get 1 more dirty. And again, I'm just making sure everything is mixed in. Sometimes at the very, very bottom, there is a little bit of oats down there. And I did have a little bit down there, so let me just get that mixed. I think that is good. Okay, now I'm just gonna see if I can estimate about half. It makes a nice amount, especially with all those oats. Yeah, I think that's about half. So let's start off, let me set this one over here. Let's start off with this bowl. I think you can see it there. And we're gonna make this one into the cranberry white chip walnut with a touch of cinnamon cookie. So I'm going to first of all sprinkle, and since this is half a batch, I'm using half of a teaspoon of cinnamon. I want to kind of sprinkle that around because I don't want it to be in one big chunk. Then I'm going to add, I might just go ahead and stir that just a little bit, push that in. Then I'm going to add, and this is again half of a recipe, so I'm going to add about a half to 3/4 cup of white chips. About a half a cup of chopped walnuts, and about, this is a cup, so about a half a cup of craisins, or whatever amount you like. There's no, you can leave one out, you can add a little more one. It'll just make your cookies more chock full of ingredients if you add more. And we like it that way. So now I'm just going to stir this. Now, if you had your mixer here, it would be very handy. And that's one reason why I'm keeping that one in the bowl, because I can use the mixer to mix in the chocolate chips and the pecans. This might have been the one I should have used the mixer on. Whoops, got some ingredients jumping out. And it is a very thick dough right now with all of these ingredients, but it's looking really good. Just needs a little elbow grease. Okay, so there is that one. Doesn't that look yummy? I could just eat that by the spoonful. Now let's take our other half, and to this half, and actually I think I got a little bit more in this one. Maybe I better add a little bit. We'll stir this one in here in a minute. Okay. So to this one, let's add a cup of chocolate chips, and I'm just using semi-sweet, but you can use whatever kind you like. And I'm adding a half a cup, it looks like, of pecans. You can add whatever kind of nuts you like. You could leave the nuts out. You could leave the chocolate chips out. You could just make a plain oatmeal cookie. That would be delicious too. Okay, so we're going to put this one on the mixer. Makes it a lot easier. Perfect. All right. And there's what that one looks like. Doesn't that look delicious? All right, so let me grab my cookie scoop, move things away here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got everything cleaned up, and now we have a little space to scoop our cookies. And so what I think I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna put
a few of the chocolate chip and a few of the cranberry ones on one sheet just so I can see if they're both cooking fine. Sometimes when you make cookies, you might notice, I don't think it's going to be the problem with these, but you might notice that they spread a little bit too much, and so you can always add a little more flour at that point. But we'll just see how they compare. So I'm just using a scoop, and I don't know, you can make them smaller than this, bigger than this, whatever you like. And I'm just leaving several inches for them to spread if they do spread. And I think what I'll do is do 6 of one kind and then 6 of the other. I don't know about you, but I have not had any luck with the candy scoops that I have bought in the past. I have bought Pampered Chef, everything, and I don't know if I just am too rough with them, but they always seem to break the spring or no longer is coordinated there. But I did find this one at a flea market antique store, and I don't know if it's that old, but it is so nice. It is sturdy and it is held up, and I just really like it. Do you guys have the same problems with your cookie scoops? I don't know if the dough that I make is too thick for them or what. Well, these look delicious. I'll definitely be tasting one for you. I am using my insulated sheets, and I just love my insulated sheets. I don't know if these are made anymore. I tried to put a link on Amazon last time I baked with them, and I could not find, I think they're air bake. I could not find them on Amazon. Now, it might have just been that they were out at the time. It may have been around Christmas. I don't know. But I really like them. I also have several of the other air bake pans, and they just bake so nicely. Your food doesn't burn. If you don't have the insulated pans, even putting a silicone mat instead of using the paper, parchment paper, that would work nicely too to help keep them from over browning. So my oven is preheated to 350 degrees. I am going to put these in the bottom shelf, and this is just the way I make cookies. I have 2 shelves in my oven currently, and the first one is, you know, like a little bit below middle, and the second shelf is just a little bit above middle. And when I make cookies, I start off at the bottom, and then when they're just a little bit puffed all around, I move them to the top and put the next batch of cookies in, and then they finish baking at the top. And it usually just takes a couple of minutes after they're moved to the top because they're just kind of getting a little bit of brown and just finishing up. And then I remove those. That way I can kind of keep adding cookie sheets to my oven, and I don't have to wait for a long time to bake all of them. But I can't wait to see if these come out. I will bring you back when I pull them out of the oven. Okay, I'm bringing you back for just a second. Right before I put those cookies in, I made the executive decision to go ahead and flatten them down just a little bit, just because I started thinking, you know, there's quite a bit of flour, quite a bit of oats. I want to make sure they are not going to just be, you know, stand up high. I want them to be thick, but yet a cookie shape. So they're just about done, and they look great. So here's what I did. I just took a cup, and I just gently pressed down just a little bit, not much. I just took off that peak of that ball. And if you stick your cup in sugar and do it, it'll keep from sticking, but this is gonna work fine for me.
And that way when they go in, they're more of a disc shape. And I think this is perfect because they aren't going to spread a lot. Let me bring that cookie sheet out. I think it's ready. Don't those look good? So I think they worked perfect just by making them a little flatter, just flattening off that roundness. And it looks like the chocolate chip nut and the craisin nut ones are both cooking at the same rate. And you don't want to overcook them if you want a chewier cookie. Now, if you want a crispy cookie, cook them well. But I like to have chewy in the center. So that is what my cookies are going to look like. I'm just going to go ahead and pull it off the cookie sheet like that. Let them set. Go ahead and finish baking off the rest of these. And I'll bring you back for a taste test. I have just taken the last batch out of the oven. And you can see it makes a nice amount of cookies, and you may notice right there, we have one missing. That would be Cookie Monster Andy came through and had to taste one. And of course he grabbed the chocolate chip pecan one and said that they were very good. Now, I have not tried one. I've held off for you guys. And I'm trying to figure out why I haven't made this recipe before and why I don't have the recipe. Because like I said, these are my mom's go-to oatmeal cookies. And I think maybe it's just because since she said it was off of a Quaker Oats box that I just assumed it was the one that was on there, and I would just use when I made oatmeal cookies the recipe that was on the box or on the container, I guess. It's usually under the lid. And these are not those. These are a different variety. And as these were baking, I was doing more research, and I did find somebody that put Quaker old-fashioned oatmeal cookies and was saying that these are the best, and she had the recipe just like this. And so these are a Quaker cookie recipe. It's just not one that you can find very easily. And it looks really good, so I'm excited to give it a try to see if I can make it as well as my mom. So let me flip the camera over. So I picked out one of each to sample, and I do want to tell you, when you bake these, I can't give you a time just because my oven temperature may be different than yours. Mine usually takes a little longer to bake something. Also, I'm using the insulated pans, and they take longer, especially when they're starting off cold. But what I do is I really don't rely on time. When I have them at the lower rack, now they're not at the very bottom of the oven. They're still in the middle area, but they're below the middle part. I will bake them there the longest, and they will puff up. And still you could tell they're not cooked all the way. They're still raw in the middle. And then I'll transfer them to the higher up rack. And then as soon as they lose that shine, I know they're ready. And they usually have just a very tiny bit of browning around the edges, but not much. Don't go by that. It depends on your cookie sheets too on that. But just when you see that top of the cookie no longer is shiny, it's starting to dull down, that's when you take them out. Now, if you want them a lot raw, you would take them out earlier. But I like mine to be crunchy around the edges, but in the center, nice and soft. So let's give these a try. I'm excited. So it looks like I'm going to try, this is the chocolate chip pecan one first. A very soft cookie. It really is good. A very soft cookie. It has the heartiness of the oatmeal and the nuts and the chocolate. Very good. I think I need a cup of milk. Okay, let me set this one down. Now let's try our craisin white chip walnut.
And I'll just break it here. And as you can see, it's not a crispy cookie that, you know, just snaps. It's still soft. That hint of cinnamon, the sweetness of the cranberries and the white chocolate, and then those nuts. I really like these. That tastes like a homemade cookie right there. The other ones are great. They taste like a bakery shop cookie, but this one tastes like home. I think it's that cinnamon. And I think it reminds me of my mom's. So these are really, really good. I hope you get a chance to try them. I'm going to get me a glass of milk and enjoy. And then I am getting in that sewing room and I'm getting that top of Home is Where the Heart Is quilt done. So I hope you join me.
I now have all of my blocks completed, and I think they're really looking nice. So I'm kind of playing with the layout, and I think this looks good. There's a couple spots that I'm looking at right now, and I might be changing one or two things. So I will mess with that. So the next thing I'm going to do is right between each block, we are going to have sashing pieces. We also need to have a sashing piece on the outside of the outside blocks. So I'm going to go cut some strips of sashing, and they're going to measure 4.5 inches by 18.5 inches because my blocks finished out at 18.5 inch squares. So what I'll do is I will cut those pieces, and I will need 4 times 4. I'll need 16 to do this next step. So basically this piece, this block right here is going to have a sashing piece on both sides. This one's going to have a sashing piece over here, and this one's going to have a sashing piece over here. And that will repeat the same way on all of my rows. Then what I'm going to do is I will connect all of those rows together. As you can see, I have my first row all sewn together. And if you notice, we start with one sashing piece and then separate each of the blocks with a sashing piece and then end with a sashing piece. I've also gone ahead and laid out my pinwheels just to see if I can, get them all nicely spread out so the color and everything on them looks balanced. So let me show you that. And so I am going to go ahead and I am going to finish all these 3 rows that I have left, and then I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like, and then I'll tell you how we're doing the next step. So as you can see, I have all of my rows sewn together, and I just have the cornerstones placed where I think they look good. I've kind of just tried to separate them out, making sure that they were spread out nicely. So now I am ready to do my strips that have the cornerstones on them. And so what I'm gonna do is, let's just look right here. We can see it right here. I have a cornerstone here, and then I have this space. This is the same size as the strip sashing that we have right here and here and here. All of these sashing pieces are the same size, 18.5 inches by 4.5 inches. So I am going to take and I'm going to sew together a cornerstone, a sashing piece, cornerstone, sashing piece, cornerstone, sashing piece, and a cornerstone. And I'm going to have a long strip. And I'm going to do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And when I get those 5 strips done, I'll bring you back. So I'm bringing you back for just a second. I have my first piece of sashing with the cornerstone stitched together. It's not attached to the blocks yet, it's just laying up there. But I did want to bring you back really quickly because I wanted to tell you, when you press, be sure you are pressing toward the sashing piece, this big 4.5 by 18.5 piece. If you press toward the sashing piece on your horizontal and your vertical rows, you are going to get nesting seams when you sew your strip here to your blocks. So be sure you do that because it'll make putting the quilt together at the end so much easier. Okay, I'm getting back to sewing my sashing to my cornerstones. All right, all of my cornerstone strips are finished and they're just laying in this layout. Nothing's sewn together yet. So now I'm going to be sewing my blocks and my sashing strips together. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not just going to sew these 2 together, then add this one, and then add this one. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make it go a little smoother. I'm going to sew this sashing strip right here to this set of blocks. Then I'm going to sew this sashing strip to this set of blocks, and so forth. That way I will have 4 sets of, or 4 rows of blocks plus a top sashing strip. Now on this bottom one right here, after I sew this one onto this set of blocks, I'll also add this sashing row. Okay? And then once I have those strips, then I'll put these 2 sets together and these 2 sets together. And it just keeps from having too much fabric under your sewing machine throat, and it just gets really bulky because it's easier to have this than to have 1 strip and all 3 strips. So that is just the way I like to do it. Then once I have these 2 strips and these 2 strips of blocks done, I will just finish them off by sewing them together there. And remember, we are going to be able to sew this so that we have nesting seams. If you press toward your sashing, your seams are going to nest. And so that's really important when you line up your sashing strips with the cornerstones on them to your block. You match those seams where the sashing is to those cornerstones. And if those are matched up, it's going to be great. So I'm going to go piece this all together. And then with this quilt right here, because I go all the way to the edge with my pinwheels, I am going to have to add a border. And I've got a 1-inch border of the background fabric that I'll be adding completely around this quilt. And that's just so that it won't have my binding overlapping onto my pinwheels. I like to have it a little bit set off from the binding. If you're making the uneven 9 patch, you won't have to add a 1-inch border because those uneven 9 patches were leaving off some corner blocks, and you'll have space between your uneven 9 patch and your binding. The hearts, you will want to put the 1-inch border on if you're like me. If you don't care, you can go ahead and add just the binding, but that's just my preference. That's the way I like to do it. Okay, so I'm going to get these sewn together and then I will bring you back. It's getting exciting. And here it is, all sewn together. We are looking at it now for the first time in real colors, real fabric, and it just looks so, so pretty. I just really like it. It's beautiful. So what we need to do now, at this point, this quilt should measure, let's see, 70.5 by 92.5 if everything is spot on with your seam allowance and your cutting. You might want to measure yours to see how wide and how long it is and adjust accordingly, but mine's pretty accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my background fabric, my yardage, and I'm going to cut strips of yardage that are 1.5 inches thick by width of fabric. Now I will be piecing together my small border, so I'll just sew them together like you would any other quilting piece and make them the correct length. I am going to first of all do the sides. So I will cut my 1.5 inch strips down to 92.5 inches. And that should be just the right size to go from edge to edge. Now again, measure yours. You do need it to be 1.5 inches thick, but your length may be a little bit different. Mine's going to be 92.5. Then after I add those two sides, I'm going to cut the upper and the bottom border to be 1.5 inches by 72.5 inches. And those pieces will be put on. Again, check your measurements and see what size yours is. So I'll put the sides on first, then the top and the bottom, and then I will press toward the borders and the top will be done. So I will bring you back as soon as that is finished. I can't wait. And here she is, all finished. Blocks, sashing, border, everything on. I think she looks just beautiful. All I need to do now is get her on the long arm and give her a good quilting and put binding on, and she will be finished. Now I probably won't get her quilted right away. I've got several other things I need to get done. I made this quilt the priority for these last couple of weeks, and so now I've got to catch up on those things I have neglected. So I will be sharing it with you once it's all quilted and bound, but right now we have the top all finished and I am so happy with how it turned out. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're making it or one of the blocks. I'd love to see your finished product. And I've seen a few on Facebook. You've posted them and shared them, the blocks. So I'd love to see them. Remember, if you have an Instagram account, I am at Blue Rooster Farm 23, and you can tag me and they will be where everyone can see them. I would love to see what you make with these blocks. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to like and share and leave a comment. As always, I hope you have a great week, and I hope to see you back here next time. Bye-bye.